I'm Saumya Shah, and I'll be speaking on People of Nowhere. So, Doa was a 19-year-old aspiring student who was forced by the war to live a grinding existence with a family in exile. Without a work permit in Egypt, she was forced to work for long hours for very little money. For the second time in her life, she felt she had no choice but to flee. So she, along with 300 other refugees, tried to escape on an old fishing boat. After a few days, another boat approached the vessel. Spotting the refugees crying for help, the boat rammed into the vessel. Within minutes, the old boat capsized and sank with 300 people trapped below deck. I felt like I was going to drown, said Doa. She could hear people screaming and water crashing. Sensing his end was near, a Palestinian approached with his 9-month-old granddaughter. Please take the baby, he said. I'm very tired. Then he gave up and let the sea take his life. Doa, the 19-year-old who could not swim, who had just watched her fiancé drown, was now in charge of saving a fledgling life. In recent years, her story has become more relevant than ever. Thousands of refugees are escaping persecution and violence happening in their own countries. People are waking to the terrible atrocities happening to these people in their countries. Some are responding with compassion and tolerance, while many with xenophobia and outrage. There are many facets to this crisis. The first and foremost, and the most important to address, is the helplessness of the refugee. Nobody leaves their country unless they are being forced by the people who they thought were their own. Another perspective is of the international society. Given a choice, most countries would simply choose not to accept migrants or refugees. Much of this discrimination likely stems from the fear, that refugees pose a burden on the economy. The reality is not that simple, however. While the influx of large migrant populations may put pressure on domestic economies, properly integrated migrants can increase demand, replenish stagnant economies, boost tax revenue, and fulfill unmet demand for skill and labor. You may now be familiar with the excruciating emotions involved, but what I've still failed to convey is the massive scale of this issue. Consider these shocking statistics. As of 2019, there are every one person out of 100 in the world is a refugee. That is more than 71 million people forcibly displaced. About 86% of these are hosted in developing countries. A further 20% migrants are victims of suicidal depression, and about 30% are victims of post-traumatic stress disorder. The hardships refugees face are tragic and dismal, but preventable reality. All of us can do our bit. A simple smile can make their day. We can also choose to elect politicians with more inclusive policies and ideologies. Our ultimate aims as an inclusive global society should be to make migration safer, to help refugees transition from camps to communities, to build infrastructure and bring political stability in countries such as Rwanda, Syria, Sudan, and other countries torn apart by war and violence. Let us act immediately and decisively because, as expressed by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, what is at stake here is nothing less than the livelihood and the well-being of a generation of innocents. Thank you.